The speed of AI innovations is unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's an exciting time as well as a concerning time. So how do we balance the innovations along with governance, security, as well as regulations? Join us today on the CG Hour as we talk about AI and governance and the paths to responsible innovation. Let's start the countdown. Welcome to the CG Hour, where we are coming to you live from LinkedIn as well as YouTube and a variety of channels. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. On this episode, we're going to talk all around AI governance, the paths to responsible innovation. My name is Fanny Dunnigan, and I am your host, where every episode we feature industry experts, tech leaders, and as we dive into business and technology hot topics. So this episode, let us know where you're tuning in from, and be sure to introduce yourselves in the comments of the feed. And I challenge you to connect with 3 new connections in the feed. Build your network, because you're amongst like-minded technologists here as well as business professionals. So be sure to introduce yourself, tell people where you're tuning in from, and connect with 3 new connections and build your network as well. So today we're going to talk all around AI governance, and we have prepared a research video to give you context and set the stage of what we're going to talk about. So let's roll that now. Welcome everybody. If you're just tuning in, we are the CG Hour, and today we are featuring expert panelists as we talk around AI governance. So please be sure to introduce yourselves in the feed. I see Lori here joining from California, Lisa Jordan, one of our own, joining from Dallas. So welcome everybody, and be sure to, as you listen in, to ask any questions of our audience or of our panelists, because I'll be monitoring the feed and bringing your questions to our panelists as well. But let me introduce you to our guests right now. I'll start over here. Welcome, Dan. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good to be in Dallas today.
Absolutely.
I'm Dan Clark. I'm the president of Truyo. I'm an ex-Intel executive. Truyo is an InterEdge company co-developed with Intel. Truyo is used by hundreds of enterprise clients to comply with the privacy laws and the AI governance elements as well.
Absolutely. And then we have Matt Pollard. How are you, Matt?
I'm great. Thank you for having us. Matt Pollard, I'm the Senior Vice President of AI Governance, Privacy, and Security for CG Infinity. I've been in the industry for about 25 years and really focused on privacy, audit, compliance, risk, governance. It's been a specialty for the past few years, and been working with some of the largest brands in the world. Focused on financial services, healthcare, life sciences, energy and utilities, retail. So very happy to be here.
Absolutely. And last but not least, our guest, Bhavesh Advani. How are you, Bhavesh?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Real pleasure to be here with Matt and Dan, and yourself, Fanny. I've been in the field of cybersecurity for about 21 years and have spanned multiple industries from technology to finance, government, biotech. And lately, AI and cybersecurity both have kind of taken a special focus from me. I have delved into a little bit of depth with a few founders as well of a few startups. So looking forward to having a great discussion.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of start off with where are we now, right? The current state of AI. As a general public, I really actually didn't feel much involved in it until ChatGPT came onto the scene. And but there's so much before that, before ChatGPT came on. Matt, from your perspective, right? AI is so much more than ChatGPT. Where do you kind of see the state of AI right now? What's exciting? What's not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe that AI will absolutely change the world that we're in today. And so Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, actually mentioned it is almost as fundamental as the electricity. Like that's the level that we're talking about from a disruption standpoint. Pretty exciting times. I am able to meet a lot of people and be able to figure out where they think or the idea around AI. And a lot of people have that thing around ChatGPT. And but there's other companies that have been using AI for 10, 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dan, I mean, you've been in the industry for decades, right? Like, what is your perspective of where things are at right now in AI?
So as I mentioned, I'm a former Intel executive. I actually joined Intel in the mid '80s and had the privilege of working on the laptop when it was an early idea. Now I was a low-level guy there. I was a peon at the time, but I was on that team working on what we called the first portables, and in fact, we would often get these air quotes from other people at Intel that thought we were kind of crazy. You're going to carry computers around with you, like this was a weird, crazy idea. It turned out to be a pretty good idea, and it really fundamentally changed how we interact with computers in our lives. Almost everything that we use today, from laptops to our phones, which are really computers, really evolved from that original innovation. I never thought I'd see anything like that in my career again, because it was so transformational. It was so fundamental how much this was adopted. AI is like a whole nother level. It's crazy how much AI is transforming our world and how much it's going to as we move into the future. It is much more analogous to something like electricity than it is even to the laptop. And I'm glad to be a part of the AI journey that's transforming our whole world.
Yeah. And Bhavesh, like coming from security, what are your observations of where AI is right now?
Yeah, I think that's the theme of this conversation as well, which is, progress is great. Relentless progress is many times better. But bringing in a dose of responsibility and having a responsible path is super important. I would say, given the recent news we heard about somebody in Hong Kong wiring about was it 25 million? That was a clear indication of what AI could possibly do if used in a irresponsible way. So the work is pretty much cut out for cybersecurity professionals, I would say, in terms of catching up.
And let us know in the audience what you're most excited about when it comes to AI. Well, let's dive into the business side of it, right? Matt, how do you see AI impacting businesses?
Yeah, great question. It's that adoption. I don't think any of us have seen that speed of adoption, right? With ChatGPT, they had over 100 million users in 3 months, right? And so right now we're seeing companies, every kind of function, marketing, HR, admin, operations, manufacturing, whatever it is, whatever business function, the adoption of it. But what we have to really think about is how we're governing and making sure that we're doing it responsibly. What's awesome is that you're seeing these advancements within like healthcare life sciences where AI is used to be able to identify or use vast amount of data to be able to find new drugs, right? Also have very prescriptive and tailored treatments from a healthcare standpoint. And so you flip over to another example for around like energy and sustainability. There's a company outside of Boulder that is called Boulder Imaging. They're using AI and neural networks and ML. They've been doing this for over 10 years, but they identify like endangered birds as they're going through like wind farms. And they're using that technology to slow down and stop the wind turbines to allow the bird to fly through without being injured or killed. So you think about that, you're doing something good for endangered species, but you're also looking at energy and renewable energy for civilization.
It's like multiple uses in one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. From your perspective, Dan, like how do you see AI impacting specific industries or businesses?
Well, first of all, I think AI has been around for a while. You talked about the adoption of ChatGPT. It's the fastest adopted technology in the history of the world by every measure. So we know it's fast adopted, but it's been around for a long time. We used to call it machine learning or deep learning or other things like that. It's just become accessible now that you have a large language model. It makes it easy to leverage. But this technology, the advantages of this are profound to a business. And there's something you can't or shouldn't ignore. In fact, we had one of our technology companies that we know of that, as a comparison, they took a project that was really already done, and it wasn't a bake-off. It was just to try and see how a project might be approached with AI versus without AI. And the original team was 1,000 engineers. They had about 3 years. They developed a technology around visual recognition, and they had this ready to go into production. It was ready to go, and they had met the goals of the project. They took 15 people who really understood AI, and they gave them 2 weeks. And they came up with a unique approach, completely different. They had no knowledge of the original approach. It was so much better than what the 1,000 engineers developed that even though it was just intended to be a test, that's what they put into production. This is profound in its changes to industry. The productivity increase that you can get, I think this is going to lower the barriers dramatically in many industries. There's so much efficiency to be gained. There's so much potential benefit to this. And now it's easy to tap into now that you have large language models.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's exponential versus having linear before, right? Bhavesh, from your perspective on the business side, right? Coming from Fidelity, City of Tucson, like where do you kind of see AI impacting businesses?
I think every sector, every industry is going to be positively impacted for sure. Finance, I think, since decades has been using some form of machine learning / AI in decision making, etc. But given what the example that Dan pointed out, I would say it'll be very, very visible going forward. For example, in government, population dynamics, demographics, even daily instances of if there is drift racing on the street. Yeah, there could be propositions that could be voted on, and then AI-backed cameras could detect such activities without extra manpower.
Yeah.
So implications could be pretty visible.
And
there's so many mundane applications too around just like supply management and project planning, things that have a lot of data that are easy now to crunch with AI. We have a customer who is in more of a traditional business, and just they have many people that sell their product, hundreds of thousands of them. they used to do planning at the aggregate level once a quarter. They had to look at it by region because it's too much to digest to think about hundreds of thousands of sellers. Now they have AI, and the AI plans for each individual data point perfectly. This is great for the people selling it, and it's great for the people who are supplying it. And it was actually a fairly simple use case to attack. So it's not just the esoteric ones that we're seeing. We're seeing sort of more pedestrian applications that make dramatic ramifications to businesses.
Well, even ChatGPT individually, right? Helping write emails or even trip itineraries. If I'm going to go visit San Francisco or New York, like what to do, restaurant recommendations, what the plan is. I mean, just a human, like just my productivity as a human to be able to use this is incredible.
I'm on a university board, and they were presenting something, and they apologized because they said, oh, we got 3 different presenters and we didn't have a chance to consolidate. We needed a graphic artist for a day or two to really polish this up, and they were kind of apologizing to the board. And I was like, send them to me. And they sent them to me in like 5 minutes. I had used AI and a graphics generator to just align all of the presentations so that they kind of looked like one. And I did this because I think a lot of boards, they don't really understand the kind of impact that you can have. Here was something, okay, it might have only taken somebody a half a day to have done that. I did it in 5 minutes, and I'm not even very good at it.
Yeah. And Bhavesh, I remember last time you mentioned a supply chain example around AI. I would love for you to expand on that.
Yeah, so if you look at the White House directive or the executive order and the EU directive on AI, they definitely want to know how the AI models are being trained during the testing phase, depending on the criticality and the impact of that application of that AI model, let's say. So during the testing phase, if the White House executive order is talking about being informed, that means we are looking at metaphorically software bill of materials, SBOMs, as one can call it. They are, software supply chain is a known factor in the cybersecurity universe, and it's a metaphorical extension to how AI models are being trained, sharing the testing data, the red teaming data during the development of the model. So that's what I alluded to last time, when it came to supply chain.
And I know there's just so much, there's like a whole barrage of information, and sorting through it as like the general public here. So what we did is we put together an explainer video just to kind of put everything into perspective. Matt explained it in a very unique way to talk about the offensive side and the defensive side of AI. So let's play that video right now.
When we talk about companies needing to adopt both offensive and defensive strategies, we're essentially discussing a balanced approach to leveraging technology for growth while also managing potential risk and ethical considerations. The offensive strategy means actively using the technology to drive innovation, enhance competitive advantage, and achieve business goals. This proactive use of AI not only contributes to the top-line growth, but also fosters a culture of innovation. On the other hand, a defensive strategy focuses on mitigating risk associated with AI, such as data privacy concerns, ethical issues, and regulatory compliance. It's about putting in place governance frameworks that ensure AI technologies are used responsibly and aligned with societal values. This includes measures to prevent biases, ensuring data is secure and complies to laws like the GDPR and CCPA, and establishing ethical guidelines for AI development and deployment. And what we have found is that this dual approach not only enhances a company's competitive advantage, but also builds trust with their customers, employees, and the wider public.
So there's certainly a lot of excitement around AI and all the different use cases of AI. But let's kind of tackle some of the risks as well. I want to start with you, Dan. Like overall at a macro level, what do you kind of see as things that we need to be watching out for and taking into consideration?
Well, everyone wants to adopt AI because it has this massive potential benefit and you want to go fast in it. But you also have to think about the safety and security of deploying that AI. We see example after example after example of people who are genuinely trying to deploy it and have issues, often around bias, discrimination, hallucinations, around privacy violations, around data exfiltration, security issues. All of these things come into play, and they can be quite bad. I mean, look at the Air Canada example where they innocuously put a chatbot on their website, and someone asked for a warranty for a bereavement fare, and the chatbot, the AI-based chatbot, gave them one, even though they didn't really have one. And so it just made one up, and it's so good at it. It looked professional, it looked right. When they went to redeem it, it didn't exist. And so he ended up taking them to court, and it turns out that they do have to abide by that. They didn't do this on purpose, they just didn't realize it. We see resume screening as a common application of AI. I find this is one of the most common applications that people use. They're using a product out there and they're like, oh yeah, let me get some help in resume screening. I got a lot of resumes to weed through, and they don't know there's AI at the core of that, which might be biased or might become biased over time. The Navy Federal Credit Union, this is all public information, found that their own application process for loans, the AI became biased against people of color, even though that was most of the people who actually were their customers. They didn't do that on purpose. It was because the AI itself became biased. There are laws preventing this today. You know, Title VII is just as applicable to AI as it is to human beings against discrimination. Discrimination, bias, privacy violations, security violations, data exfiltration, all of these things happen if you're not being careful about how you apply guardrails around the usage of AI.
Got it. And Matt, from your perspective, what are some of the ethical side of and risks of AI?
Absolutely. And Dan kind of touched on that, you know, Title VII, Title IX. Anytime you have an AI model that is making a decision about a consumer, that is where your risk is. And so making sure that you are truly looking at your data set, looking at the model, looking at what the decision is or the data that's provided back, make sure that it's not biased, hallucinations, drifting. That's a common problem that we see within AI models as well. So anytime you're
What
making...
does drifting mean?
So drifting is ultimately you have this, the data model is used, and over time it starts to drift away from the data set and really the decisions that are around that. And so it can, it was actually interesting, there's a case study in regards to money fraud of where models were used, or the data set was used in regards to how criminals were doing money laundering and whatnot. Well, criminals changed the way that they were doing it, and the data set had changed, and ultimately the decision had drifted away from that.
Now, Bhavesh, I know you've had extensive years in the finance industry, right? What are some of the risks that you see? I mean, it's our money, right? Like, speaking of consumers, consumers care about their money, right? What do you see as the risks with these AI models?
So twofold, right? So one is how they are built, incorporating everything that Dan and Matt just mentioned, hallucination, drifting, et cetera, et cetera. That's one, the models they adopt, the models they build internally, and they may also make it available on a B2B basis to other financial institutions if they wish to make it a revenue stream. Beyond development, it's also how they consume once it has been tested and everything has been said and done, how they consume it on a daily basis. All the cybersecurity governance controls that we've known and we've talked about, they all apply in daily consumptions for various use cases, especially if major decisions are going to be based on those models. For example, where to invest, the ESG factor, and similar. So it's like a two-sided coin thing. One is building it, second is how you consume it.
And I believe there still has to be a human component to AI. So often we have seen companies that have just launched it and it's like launch and forget it. That's where you're at risk. And so as these decisions are coming out and leveraging AI, you have to have that human interaction to ensure that you're not making decisions that are biased, not having hallucinations. You really have to look at it, and that's why the importance part of the governance board is needed.
And Dan, I wanted you to kind of dive a little deeper into the data side of things, right? It's the data that governs what the model predicts or shares, right? Can you talk a bit about that, the data side of things?
All these models get trained on data. And we've seen some odd examples where at the end of the process, the thing is they think it's become biased or maybe it'd been poisoned and drifted over time. And it turned out that it was just that the people in charge of hiring were, they were prejudiced. And so this just bubbled to the surface and it became apparent. This happened to our own government. One of the agencies of the government found out, and in fact, the person who investigated them coined this term that they only hired pale males from Yale. And I'll never forget that, but pale males from Yale. Why is that? They all were blaming the AI. And how did this AI get biased? Well, you look at the data set, and it turned out that the people in charge, they were discriminating. And it just got exposed by the AI. We see this in data sets all the time. I asked ChatGPT to produce an image for me, and it produced an image of the most common doctor treating the most common patients in Africa, and it produced a white man treating black children. And I asked it, what's the most common doctor, what's the ethnicity of the most common doctor in Africa? Well, 99% of them are black or African people. Why just show me one that's a white person then? It's because the data set it was trained on was visual. And if you think about if you go to Africa, you do your big mission to help people, Doctors Without Borders, you're probably going to pose like 1,000 pictures of yourself treating people. And I guess mostly children, even though 90% of the people they treat are adults. But most of the pictures had children in it. And most of the pictures were posted by people who have access to the internet and who had a need to do this. So it wasn't that the model somehow was flawed. It was trained on data that was highly skewed. You have to be aware of these things. You have to understand the propensity for bias in your data at the core.
Yeah, such a great point. And let us know how things that you might have been noticing online as well in the use of ChatGPT or other tools. What kind of risks are you guys noticing around that in the audience? So combating the risks, right? There's a lot of regulations that are now going into place. The White House AI order, the European Union's AI orders, FTC regulatory compliance requirements. It's just a lot, right? So Dan, help us kind of like sort through it and kind of like help us analyze it and kind of think it through properly.
The legislative landscape here is the fastest evolving I've ever seen in my career, and I do a lot of tracking this. It's really almost crazy how fast it's going. And because of that, they're often a little bit sloppy at the same time. The EU's AI Act, which is 258 pages, passed before it was scheduled to be voted on because they wanted to get something out there really rapidly. We're seeing this at the state level too. Utah just passed a law. It's pretty narrow, but it says consumer protections apply to AI. You can't say it was AI as a defense. Just yesterday, we saw Colorado came out of committee with an AI law or an AI act that seems to have support. It's fairly comprehensive, especially for a state law, and it has a unique element in it, affirmative defense, if you do testing for bias. So they're really encouraging this. The White House Act says you should test for bias. The New York law says that you have to test for bias in certain circumstances. Now you're saying that this also provides a defense for the company if you do it. You really have to think about that. Fortunately, all of these laws and all these directives, they all kind of boil down to mostly some common principles. That is, make sure that you respect privacy, respect the privacy laws wherever that is. Make sure that you're transparent and provide notice about what you're doing, especially when it affects consumers. You need to consider security. You need to consider the avoidance of bias, the avoidance of discrimination, and you should train your people on these potential harms that can come from AI. So at least for now, we see a lot of real commonality. I think the White House in particular has tried to coordinate at least the terms and definitions with various countries and various states. So that's good. We're seeing commonality, and we're also seeing that these things kind of make sense. You should be doing that anyways. You should be testing your models for bias. You should be respecting privacy anyways. You certainly want to avoid bias and discrimination.
And then Matt, at a business level, so that's at the kind of overall regulation level, then what do businesses need to consider in following these regulations and governing themselves as well?
Absolutely. We actually have debated this a lot of how do you even start a governance program around AI and what's the first thing that you do. But I think that you have to jump in. You really need to understand what your AI strategy is. You need to look at use cases. You really need to identify the areas of AI, of how it is impacting the business. Is it impacting a consumer? Is it more just from an operational standpoint, looking at that? Building out a governance committee is critical. So there are requirements around that, making sure that you have various skills, various experience, various knowledge. So you're bringing in different groups and individuals together to make sure that you have a strong steering committee when it comes to AI. Really looking at process, procedures, documentation, looking at your data set, looking at the model and how it's operating, the decisions, the governance around that. Making sure that you're able to audit. It's something that Dan and I talk about a lot is really training your organization as well and educating them. And how do you do that effectively? So those are kind of the key pillars around AI governance that I think are absolutely critical to be able to mitigate the risk.
Yeah, thank you.
I think use case in particular
Yeah.
is super important because with security, Bhavesh is an expert in security. Often that's an organizational challenge, and it's okay to approach it from an organizational level. But with AI, it's all about the use case. If you're using AI to beef up a little bit of your marketing materials, how much do you really care? Maybe the camera tracking that we're using today uses AI. Do you really care? Does that really matter to anyone? Is that going to get biased? Is it going to discriminate? No. So you don't really care. If you're using it for resume screening, if you're deciding credit, if you're deciding housing, these things are very high risk deployments, and you have to think of them in terms of the use cases at a company rather than just the overall approach.
And we're talking about kind of a formalized AI tools that organizations are using, but we all know that organizations are made up of individuals. Individuals can use their own AI tools on their laptop and making decisions, right?
Yeah.
And so that is another area, especially from a security standpoint, of where you are putting your organization at risk. So it goes back to training and education of like, listen, we want to use AI tools. We want that, the scalability, the agility, the productivity, that's awesome. But making sure that you're transparent, you're making sure that you are protecting privacy laws and all of those things, and you're not putting your company at risk. That's huge.
There's an element of self-governance too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that comes through the communication and training of an organization.
Yeah, maybe training is number one on the list because
That's-
it's like we talk about this a lot. It's hard to know where to start, but it's like just training the organization about like bias happens. Data, you put it in a public model and you may have accidentally let go of company secrets. You have to train people about the potential risks of AI. Maybe that is the first place to start.
Well,
And like Bhavesh, like from your security hat, right? And your experience in that aspect, what are these kind of use cases that we need to be aware of and like tie in those regulations and put in those guardrails?
Right. Starting with the most benign use case, let's say, and the most achievable, an organization could consider writing an acceptable use of AI policy and making it very conspicuous and making a very conscious effort in terms of a governance board, for example. That will force them to define the use cases, to Dan's point. And to Matt's point, the governance board will be accountable for that acceptable use of AI policy. That's like one of the easiest, lowest hanging fruits you can address. And beyond that, to something more complex. For example, if an organization decides that they want to leverage an existing AI model to build their own AI app, then they have to have a very good understanding of what that model is, how they select that model, and then when they build the app, how to test it for bias, etc. So that complexity is on the other side of the spectrum in terms of preparing and governing while developing apps based on AI models.
And where are they getting the data from to feed the model?
That is very important. And one of the basic tenets is to not use live production data or PII, use synthetic data to train it because mishaps could happen.
What do you mean by synthetic data? Help us understand.
Synthetically generated data, which is not, say for example, a city government should not be using live citizen data to train AI model.
Yeah.
Probably use synthetic data.
Another approach you can take is to scramble the data.
Correct.
In our platform, we actually have the ability to take a large data set and scramble it in such a way that you've de-identified individual people, and you'd end up with, like, the simple example, you'd end up with like Lavesh Clark, who lives at Matt's address in Colorado. And so you've still got valid data that isn't stochastic or synthetic in nature, and allows you to kind of train those models without violating the PII. So that's another approach you can take. Actually, there was just an article a couple days ago that a large tech company is challenging the CPPA on the idea that you have a right to delete data all the way back through to training. And they came out and said, look, you can't untrain a model.
Right.
You have to roll it back if you want to do that. So if I want to delete my data from that and you want to allow this in your legislation, I can't do that. I can't physically untrain a model. So our approach to that is to, instead of using synthetic data or combined with synthetic data, is to scramble the information in a way that you can still train it on real data.
That's right.
Yeah. And for those of you in the audience, I'm curious whether you've put in any kind of governance policies or guidelines in your organizations yet, or have you started to think about that? I want to play for you all a video talking about the Truio platform. Dan, can you set it up a bit for us?
Sure. So Truio's been around for about 8 years. It's an InterEdge company, but jointly developed with Intel. It's pretty well known in the privacy market for being used by hundreds of enterprise clients to comply with many privacy laws, with GDPR and CCPA and things like that. Has a core of automation around connections to underlying systems. We've taken that, and about 13 months ago, we took the step, probably the first in the market, to start deploying that into AI governance. And in September, we entered the market with a product. If you saw our product today, you wouldn't recognize it from the first one because it's changed so dramatically. But this platform in AI governance, we believe it's the first one in production in the industry. It's used by a number of enterprise clients now today in production to help with their governance. What we try to do is empower that governance board, giving them visibility to the use cases, allowing them to remediate use cases, but we have to have underlying technology behind that. It's not enough to ask people what they're doing. You have to actually scan for usage. Because people, sometimes they don't want to tell you, sometimes they don't know. Sometimes it's an old application that they didn't realize. Sometimes it's like that person in HR who just slid a switch and didn't know they enabled the AI. So we scan for usage, we survey people, we ask vendors, but then we also test for bias, which I think is crucial to do.
It's almost like we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And the first thing you have to do is know what the use cases are.
Yeah.
And every time we turn this on, what we find is even sophisticated companies that are saying that, oh, we don't use AI, or I have 3 use cases that are approved. Every single time we start scanning for usage and we find multiple new, usually within 5 minutes, we find new use cases that they were unaware
They didn't even
of.
know.
Got it. Well, let's play that video now. So as you can tell, there's a lot for us to consider. There's a lot of things that we need to consume and kind of learn along the way. So how do we protect our businesses, right? How do we, as we look towards the future at this hugely accelerated rate, how do we protect our businesses? Matt, I'd love for you to kind of start off, like where do we start, right? Give us a starting point.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit before, but you really do need to know what your strategy is of leveraging AI and those use cases and the business value and what you're trying to get out of it. And so that's absolutely critical in that state. You're also really, you need to look at your process, your procedures, the compliance, the regulation, the security. Those are really key components of building out that strategy and your true governance program. But then again, it goes back to how are you going to train your organization? How are you going to enable them? And how are you going to adopt these things with responsibility and ethics?
You had a line when we were talking about we actually have to kind of slow down to accelerate.
Yes.
Expand on that.
Yeah, it's a great story. I attended the PSR conference last September, and Trevor Hughes, the president of the IAPP, gave an incredible example of Bertha Benz. She was married to Carl Benz, who was the founder, or considered the founder, of the modern motor vehicle. And she actually took a prototype car and loaded up her 2 kids and went about 100 kilometers without telling her husband to, try out this car, right? And so she's a very smart woman. She had an understanding around engineering and whatnot. And during this process, she realized that, listen, there's some other ways that we can do this. So the brakes were like wood on wood and whatnot. She worked with a cobbler to actually put on shoe leather on that wood to actually create the first brake. So that's awesome because she was able to brake the car, right, and slow it down and keep her children safe. But in all reality, that brake allowed her to go faster. And that's the same way that we're thinking about AI governance. We don't want to slow down the adoption. We don't want to slow down the scalability and the productivity of this. But what we do want to do is make sure that it's responsible, it's protected, it's safe, and it's responsible.
I can't even imagine nowadays driving a car without a brake.
Can you imagine?
But I guess it's a vital piece of innovation, right?
Absolutely.
And then Dan, from like a tool and technology perspective, building on the strategy and the process that's defined, now what?
Well, I think, first of all, you've kind of convinced me training starts the process, maybe. I don't know. But we spent a lot of time and effort on our training modules for this, for the corporate training, just to help people understand the potential risks of it. I like approaching it from a use case basis because I think that's what helps you understand and determine the relative risk. You need some type of a governance board. You have to have a set of principles that they want to employ. I think you need tools around this too, because it's going to be really challenging to administer this in an organization. And at the end of the day, it is like the car. You want to go really fast. In your story, she would only go a couple miles an hour as fast as somebody could run in front of her with a red flag until she got the brakes working well enough that she could go 20 miles an hour, which was the capacity of the car. You want to go fast with AI, and you want to take advantage of this, but you need brakes. You need guardrails around it. You have to do things like consider the potential for bias and discrimination. You have to consider privacy. Actually, one of our largest customers, if they were sitting here, I think they would say the place to start is some sort of a bulletin board just to share use cases. Because what they saw with this when they started to do this, a good example of this is Chai, which is the the healthcare organization that does AI, the Center for Ethical AI Usage in Healthcare. And they created a bulletin board, and what they found was, first of all, people were sharing use cases. This allowed everybody else to go, oh, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should use it to do my customer service notes. Maybe I should use it for reordering of supplies or whatever it was. But the unintended effect that ended up being a big benefit was other people looked at this and would say, hey, that could become biased. And they ended up, we kind of call it the whistleblower policy, which has a negative connotation, but really it's just groupthink around applications. This is all new. It's all new. There's no recipe, there's no books you can read and say, well, what's the bias potential when you do this application because somebody just invented it yesterday. If you allow your group to be exposed to that, it allows them to go faster because they're seeing these examples, but you have groupthink that allows you to consider the potential risks.
But even from a technology standpoint, this is why we love partnering with Truo, right? And so your technology to actually be able to scan environments, structured data, unstructured data, websites, source code, whatever it might be, and be able to identify the use of AI, be able to list it out, to be able to put some sort of risk score to it, that transparency is absolutely needed. That technology is revolutionary. I've never seen anything like that. And I believe our clients are extremely, it brings so much value and safety in connecting that technology to that governance board and their strategy and their use cases. That's your perfect match.
Got it. Bhavesh, on the business side, how receptive do you think users are going to be to training, to governance, to new tools? Like they have their day job already, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly we're putting on this extra layer. What do you think the usability and change management side of all this will be?
Yeah, that's a fascinating area to think about. And I would say, taking the same example about the car and the brake, I would say if they, the governance board and the leadership can articulate to the users, like if you want to do your job faster, want to be more productive, come to the training or encourage them to take the training, be educated, see what tools are available or quote unquote made available by the technology department in that company. Educate them about those tools, how those tools can help them increase their productivity and how to responsibly use them. Also, put forth in front of them acceptable use of AI policy listing the use cases like Dan mentioned. And new hire orientations are great as well to inform the newest of the newest team members.
There almost is like new departments or resources that you have to put into place, right? Training departments or people learning just like 3 steps ahead so they can bring along the people that are 3 steps behind.
We were talking about this morning. In all reality, governance isn't a nice to have. It is going to be a requirement. And as Dan talked about, these regulations and these laws, we can anticipate more and more of them, right? There is going to be a lot of protection around this. So it's awesome to be able to launch AI tools, but you absolutely are going to have a governance organization to be able to support that. Again, not a nice to have, it will be a requirement.
Well,
and not just from the legislative perspective. It's like the Air Canada example. They got to live with a bereavement warranty now, where you refund half their money for people under bereavement because an AI hallucinated that. It's not just the legislative side. You actually see real problems. Samsung exfiltrated a whole bunch of data on their latest mobile chip that Qualcomm started taking advantage of. Because they pasted it into a public model. This is all public information. There are real risks to using AI if you're not careful about it. The legislation is just trying to codify that. They're scared of it, especially around the consumer side.
Well, we talked a lot about training and education. So walk me through in our audience, like what training might look like, what education might look like at the business level, at the organizational level. Like what if you kind of put into place at some of the clients that you've worked with, Dan?
So we actually decided to break the training into 9 parts that are pretty small. So they're each one's kind of digestible. This is a corporate training. It's not really intended for the one AI expert at the company. It's intended for everybody who might use AI, which is almost everybody. It's HR, it's programmers, it's marketing people, it's hiring, it's technology people. It's a numerous large group. We broke it into small pieces where each piece deals with one of the potential issues. We start with a video, we reinforce that with clickable information because that tends to be more digestible, glossary. We always add a quiz to help make sure there's retention of the information. But we broke it into the categories that we're talking about. There's one on bias specifically. There's one specifically on the potential for security issues. There's one on privacy. Each one is quite short, allows you to digest that individually, but we ended up where we had to create a total of 9 segments in order to do this. And then we do create a certification at the end. We also have toyed around with integrating with the company's access portals. So, Bhavesh understands this better than I do, but the company allows you to either go to websites or not, right? And we've toyed around with the idea of having like a pop-up that says you're not allowed to go to that website, you haven't done the training yet. And so to try and reinforce the idea of making sure you complete the training.
And I don't think it's a one and done either, right?
No, we're updating. I'm updating it right now. This morning, Colorado came out of nowhere.
Absolutely.
You have to update the training.
Yeah.
But even at the top of the hour, we were talking about the acceleration of AI and the adoption of it. So it is changing every minute, and it's getting more advanced and more evasive in our organizations. So I think from a security standpoint, I'm used to filling out one security kind of like training a year or whatever. With AI, I don't think you're going to have that. I think you absolutely have to be educating and communicating to your organization on a weekly basis and providing some, I'm not going to say like fear and uncertainty and doubt, but provide some like true case studies in regards to the risk of AI, educating and enabling your organization to really understand the importance of this. It's got to be a continuous learning.
Yeah. And Bhavesh, how do you kind of see these kind of trainings rolled out in businesses and the receptivity or reception of them?
I love the idea of product-based training. If there are 10 products out there in an enterprise that have been approved for use, people with job functions that need their product to improve their productivity, product-based training is amazing before they can use the product. Also, use case-based training.
Yes.
Just like we've seen with SaaS products. A company is going to buy more than one for that same need. So one can imagine multiple AI products for that same need in the future. And use case-based training could be probably another way of going about it. Yeah.
Do you see new AI departments or governance departments popping up in organizations?
I do foresee a fancy job title coming up in the industry, Chief of AI or Chief AI Officer. There might be some companies already having an open requisition for that, but I think if it helps the cause of AI governance, AI cybersecurity, awareness of how to use it, then one more fancy job title is okay. Yeah.
Thank you. And for all of you in the audience, let us know how you kind of see yourselves learning and training and adopting in your various businesses this governance AI model, as well as different tools that can be put into place. Matt, you recently came back from a conference.
I did.
Tell us about that conference so that we can kind of set up the video that we're going to play.
Absolutely. So I attended the IAPP conference, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. They've been doing this for many, many years. And it's a great time to get together as privacy practitioners and technologists to understand what's happening from a privacy standpoint, regulation, compliance, technology, advancement, adoption, whatnot. And it's an incredible time to be able to meet with technology partners and see what they're doing. But the one thing that I've seen over the last year and a half is a lot of the conversations from privacy is actually moved to AI or the convergence of both. making sure that privacy is included from an AI perspective. But that's been the common theme of what I've been seeing.
Any big takeaways from the conference?
It's buckle up. Because I think we're on a ride and it's going to go fast.
Okay, let's roll the video.
It's great to be at IAPP in Washington, D.C.
This is my first IAPP here in DC.
I'm speaking from the IAPP Global Privacy Summit.
I'm enjoying another amazing IAPP conference.
This is our first year at IAPP. It's been great to see that transition from, oh, we're doing this because the regulatory frameworks require it, and more towards it's the right thing for us to do as a company. That's definitely the way that we think about it at Visa.
So as you can see, there's a lot that we have to think about and be doing as businesses. Be sure to connect with all our guests today. We have Dan Clark, Matt Pollard, as well as Bhavesh Advani. Connect with them on LinkedIn. Be sure to follow their content because there's still much, much more to be learning and to be governing and addressing. But it's certainly exciting times. So thank you, Dan, Matt, Bhavesh, for your time and your insights. You all be sure to connect with them and stay tuned on our next episode, and be sure to follow the CG Infinity company page to be updated on our next episode, and we'll see you next time. And as always, people first, driven to transform. See you next time, everyone.